Dr. Jazz.
Your overseas live recordings on your Bandcamp.
Yeah.
And I remember this band since, when did Overseas 1 come out? 2003, I think, or 4, something like that.
3, yeah.
I remember I was then also on Fresh Sound, and I bought that CD, and I was like, man, you know, it's like everything is included in this music, and all genres kind of mixed together in your own sound world. And now when I listen to the live ones, it's even more diverse. You see that, and I wanted to ask you, just like, how do you? I love the 55 bar, by the way, with Gerald on drums. That's phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
2003 or something like that. But
yeah, very early. Yeah.
How did this band come together first in the beginning, and how do you see the evolution of this group? Because it's been quite a steady ensemble, right, with some guests included.
Yeah, it was kind of a little bit fluctuating personnel in the beginning. It started out basically with, on the record, it's kind of like 2 different groups. There was my more like school buddies, which is Kris Davis, Jason Rigby, Loren Stillman. So that was and piano player Wells Hanley. So that was kind of like my buddies from school. And then I did another session with more like people I really wanted to play with at that time, like Gerald and Craig and Tony, Craig Taborn, Tony Malaby, and I had Jacob Sack piano. So, but when I started, so that record came out with both those bands, and I think the mix worked okay because,
definitely,
you know, that first record is like this is the kind of thing with a lot of people's first record. You just want to do everything and present everything. So it's a long record and it's all different bands and blah blah blah. But somehow I think it came out okay. But so when I started doing live shows, it kind of just it was kind of hard to do 2 different bands. So in the beginning, it was just a mix of those 2, whoever could do it, and then eventually just settled in on Malaby and Jacob, because that was a great combo.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, they're all amazing musicians. It could have ended up any other way, but Malaby and Jacob, and then Gerald a lot, and then
Kenny, right?
And Kenny came in like around 2005, 2004, I think. Oh. Yeah, I remember going to see Kenny at Tonic with I think he was subbing, maybe even. It was a Brad Shepik trio gig with Scott Colley.
Oh yeah, wow, yeah.
And Kenny on drums, and I was just blown away. And I was like, man, that's the sound I've been looking for, kind of the beat I've been looking for. So I was happy he was into doing it. And so since 2005, it's been kind of the same. And then we added Brandon Seabrook.
Yeah, man, I'm such a fan of Brandon.
Yeah, in 2009, I think, something like that. And as far as future prospects, I think the band will be that for as long as we're all around and can do it. I mean, Tony just moved to Boston.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
but I mean, I think it'll still be. He'll come down here a lot, and we'll still be doing it. I want to keep going. No reason to stop. It's fun still, and it's challenging me, and so it's great.
How do you keep it fresh for like? I mean, of course you write new music, but like, and you know then how the band sounds like, but still, you know, I love keeping the same group, but also playing with other people. But in this overseas ensemble, like, you know, when I speak with Paul McCandless, or when I did, he played with Oregon for 50 years together, more or less the same 3 people at least. Like, how was that? How did that function for you in this band, or it still does? Like,
that's a good question. I think when you find the people you love playing with, it kind of never gets old. I think it's just every time we play, I have such a good time. And I love writing for the band. You know, knowing the musicians so well. Like when I sit down to write or come up with an idea, I can hear the sound, but then they always surprise me in the end anyway. It never sounds exactly what I think
so
in my head, which is the great part. Like, it's very unpredictable in the best possible way. But I think when you find people you love playing with, it's always fresh in a way. Like, you feed off each other, and everybody, we go home after a gig and people have new experiences and in life and in music, and then we come back together and we channel that, and it always feels a little different and fresh. So I don't think about it as a problem. But I mean, every record I kind of try to kind of have like a little bit of a concept, so change it up musically a little bit in the composition department. Try to at least.
How do you do that, by the way? I mean, when you compose, when I listen to your tunes, like, I don't know, I hear so many influences. I listened yesterday to those, and I remember those tunes like Breath of Bark and Neil and stuff like that. It sounds like, indie pop, almost rock from the 80s, which I love. It's like so, and with jazz, like, what's your procedure usually when writing? Like, do you come out daily with ideas, or like you decide now we're going to write a new one, or?
No, it's usually before a record. That's when I write the most stuff. And in terms of what inspires me, I think everybody goes through phases. Like right now I'm really into, like you said, 80s pop or music from Indonesia or whatever. Like then. So I think it's just about creating a framework for yourself. Like, okay, now I'm just gonna kind of draw inspiration from this area of music, and to help me find a path for my own record. So like the last record was number 5, I think. 5. I kind of was really into like new wave, like early 80s. Joy Division, New Order.
I love that.
All those kind of Heelys, all those kind of bands. So I kind of wanted like more like a beat-driven record, more like that kind of energy. So as soon as I had that in my mind, it was easier to write, because then I knew what I was looking for. But so I think it's all about kind of, when you start writing, having a little bit of an idea of what you want, have like a framework for what you want the record to sound like. So I'm still searching for the next record and the next framework. I've kind of always wanted to do a record with string section.
Oh yeah, man.
I mean, it's going to require a lot of time and a lot of funding. So, but that's a dream. So maybe one day.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Like you'll have a face of technical death metal, and like Sugar meets Eivind, like
for sure.
No, but speaking of these bands, like you have these incredible musicians, like, and I think Kenny's older than you, and I think Tony's slightly older than you also as well.
Yeah, and he's 10 years older exactly, I think.
Yeah,
Ken maybe I think Kenny's maybe a little younger than Tony actually.
Yeah,
and Brandon is a little younger, and Jacob is
younger. Yeah,
the youngster.
yeah. But if you put yourself in the role of a band leader, like how would you see? Because I know, I mean, I wanted to ask you about Tony later, but you played with him also as a sideman. And how do you see yourself in the role of a band leader when you present new compositions? Are you like a strict band leader, or when you're on the road, like how would you describe yourself? I mean, like musically and
I'm definitely not a strict band leader. I mean, we don't really rehearse that often, to be honest. And just play gigs. But I mean, obviously we have rehearsed, but when we do, it's just like, I just hand out the music, and I say the least amount of things possible, and we just play it, and we just kind of get the written stuff down, and then on the gig is when
you can
explore it more, and it happens. Things happen, So I mean, they're very easy. My band is very easy to play with and tour with, and anything. I mean, I just I don't give too much direction, but when I do, they they listen or they don't. But
Yeah.
like I like it fluid and open and elastic, like. But and on the road, like, yeah, I mean they're so experienced.
Yeah, sure.
Being on the roads, I don't really have to babysit anybody. Like lobby call tomorrow is 8 a.m. and okay, everybody there and
yeah,
it's easy. It's easy.
Yeah, but I mean, I mentioned Tony, and I want I know you played with him in the Paloma Recio project.
Yeah,
and I love that band. I spoke with Tony also about it, and it's beautiful. You and the sheet, like it's such a, I love the sheet. I mean, he's like water.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like
sure.
Incredible drummer. And how when does your story with Tony begin? I mean, like, how did you guys hook up in New York and playing together?
He was playing a lot at the internet cafe, like late 90s, early 2000s. So I knew of him and I had heard him and really loved his playing. And so had Jacob sax. So me and Jacob, we had a trio with another drummer, Don Peretz. And so we wanted to do a show at Knitting Factory. Or we had a show at Knitting Factory, and we wanted to bring in a guest.
Yeah.
And we all loved Tony, so we asked Tony, and he did it. And I remember I had a mini disc recorder, so I recorded the gig. And so we played some of my tunes, and so that's kind of how it started. So when I decided I wanted to do my own record, I had been listening to this mini disc, like how he played over my tunes, or in general, I was just I have to ask him to join my band, and he was down. And after that, we played a lot in Kris Davis's band in the 2000s with Jeff Davis, and that was really the way Tony. That was kind of like a workshopping band for a while. Like we really got together like once or twice a week or a lot, and the way we worked on the music, that was really a big learning experience. And Tony kind of, when Tony gets into it, like rehearsing, it gets really deep. So that was a great learning experience. So that was very different from the way I rehearsed my band. Like just run the music and then. And that was more like workshopping a band thing in the rehearsal space, which was really interesting. And the same with the Paloma Recio, like Tony can be very specific in rehearsal, like, no, try something more like this.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. But when it comes to the gig, he's not going to come up to you after the gig. You didn't do what we like. Then if anything is fine, but I think it's really cool to go through options in the rehearsal. Yeah. In the rehearsal and try different things and be a little specific and like not just be like, oh man, that sounds great. Just kind of, I didn't like that so much. Can you try this? And what if we do blah 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 blah? So it's cool to do that, and because on the gig then you have that all that in the back of your head. Yeah. You forget it kind of, but it's still there somehow. And so he's a very inspiring band leader, and now he's going to be a teacher at Berkeley and Boston. So
lucky students, man.
Yeah, very lucky students. He's a great teacher.
Yeah, amazing. But you've been a mainstay now in the New York scene, like for more than 20 years. I mean, in this creative scene, and and you come from Norway, and I wanted to ask you, like, I know many Norwegian musicians, and I played with them, and following the scene, like. You have on the one hand like Jan Garbarek, like this kind of ECM-ish vibe, and on the other hand you have Håkon Kornstad and Paul Nielsen Loven, this amazing kind of more modern avant-garde, whatever you want to call it, free jazz scene. And how did all this form up with you? Like, let's say growing up as a teenager in the 80s in Norway or beginning of the 90s. Like, how did your first exposure to jazz start? Like, I mean, one of the first records I heard was by Garbarek, because it's so accessible in a way. But what was your upbringing musical like, especially jazz?
Well, my dad is a hobby saxophone player and a big music lover, jazz lover. So there was always music in the house, and he played in like a few like traditional jazz bands, like 30s style in Oslo. So I was always around music and musicians, and so that's how I heard the music the first time. But when I started playing seriously myself, like I started on drums, but then I switched to bass.
Oh, really?
After,
Oh.
Yeah, like when I was very little, and then I switched to bass. With my cousin left his electric bass at our place, and I started fooling around, and oh man, this is the perfect thing. It's like pitch and rhythm in the same instrument.
Yeah.
So then that's the upright bass. But yeah, I think I always had, growing up in Norway, I always had one ear in the American jazz scene and one ear in the Norwegian one, in a way. Like, and they kind of complemented each other, or they fulfilled different parts of my musical appetite, whatever, you know. So, but it was very inspiring to be in Norway in the 90s. Like, I saw Garbarek quite a few times at festivals, and I was a big fan of Terje Rypdal. That's how we say it in Norway. I don't know.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, man, I love him. Yeah.
Yeah. People here say Terje Rypdal.
Really?
Who? Terje Rypdal. Yeah. So he's that was a bit, and his Chaser trio in the 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
Man. I love that band. I was like, so that's really cool to grow up going to festivals and seeing these guys play all the time. And there's also a great jazz club in Oslo called Oslo Jazz House, where I saw all those bands, Nils Petter Molvær and Boogie Vessel. And so but then I also like very into, like, in the beginning, Miles, the 80s stuff. I was like my big thing, and then that led to checking out John Scofield and Mike Stern, and then I went further back to, I mean, I always, as I said, my dad always played the old stuff around the house, but eventually I started really getting into the Miles 50s. Paul Chambers was and is my biggest bass hero, I think.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Yeah. So no, it's a great place to grow up and be a musician in Norway.
Yeah.
It's still great. A lot of amazing musicians coming out of there all the time. They have good support for the music, and
sure.
A lot of opportunities, a lot of festivals. And so and like I met Håkon very early. He was maybe 17. Same with Paul.
Oh, really?
So I met those guys in the 90s, and I played with them quite a lot before I moved over to New York. And Håkon used to come here quite a lot, and we used to play New Blue all the time. And
oh, really? Oh, man.
Yeah. So I kept in touch with quite a lot of them. So.
Yeah, I saw some footage on YouTube, like 2019. You play with, I think, with Paul and.
Oh yeah, that was an old band.
The Quintet or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's called the Quintet. It was like with two contemporaries of Garbarek and Terje Rypdal from the late 60s. They were like, and they kind of ended up a little bit on the, what do you call it, on the side of society for a while. But then in the late 90s, we did they had like a little comeback with this band that we called the Quintet, with Paul and my friend Kjetil Gutvik on guitar, and Bjørnar Andresen and Kalle Neumann were the two older guys. And so in 2019 we did a reunion kind of show, so 20 years later. So
still kept in touch.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that the move to New York, and how come you decided to do that? Like, what was the main trigger? I mean, considering that the Norwegian scene is quite strong, right? Yeah.
And it was kind of more just wanting to experience something new. I came here like a few years before I moved. I came here on vacation, and I just really loved the city, like the energy, and I felt like, oh, this is so different from anything I've ever experienced. So I just really got a kick out of it, just being here for a couple of weeks. And then, so when I was done with my education in Norway, I studied classical bass at the academy there. I wanted to maybe study some more, and a good way to get into the US is to study, So because then you get a visa and everything.
Yeah,
so
sure.
yeah, I applied to Manhattan School of Music, and so I did my master's degree in jazz performance there, and I met all these great musicians. I met Jacob Sachs and Jeff Davis, Loren, Stillman. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Dan Weiss was there.
Yeah,
Dan Green. So it's a really, really great scene. And then after I was done with school, they offer you like a year after where you can stay. And so I did that, and then a year passed by, and then I figured, oh no, I want to try it a little longer, and I got a visa, and just I never really planned ahead that much. And then now there's been 20 years, and now I have family and kids here.
Yeah, sure.
Pretty settled. But
how was this beginning years for you? Like, you know, the first years to get acquaintances and gigs, and
yeah, I mean, it took. I mean, I think if you're maybe a different personality, a little more less Norwegian or something. If you're like more outgoing and going,
okay.
It would happen maybe a little quicker. But my first 2 years in school was great. Like all we did was play and do sessions and hang out. And then after school was over, it took a while for I did a bunch of like cabaret gigs and all kinds of random gigs. But it took maybe 2-3 years before the ball really started rolling, and I started getting the kind of gigs I wanted. I think it took after I released my solo record, that's when it kind of started happening more. So
other gigs,
I just found this like list over. I used to post my gigs on my website like we all do, and I saved them. So I found that list the other day, and I was surprised over all the gigs I used to do back then, like 3-4 gigs in New York City every week. Like,
oh man, that's a lot. Yeah. Wow.
Now it's like, I mean, now it's the pandemic was maybe like 4 gigs a month or something. Like, but I mean, I guess I'm more picky now, but what kind of gigs I do, or maybe that's my experience. I don't know. But yeah, I was surprised to see. Wow, I really took the subway a lot back then with my bass.
I remember I was in New York in 2002 or 3. And I was babysitting for Binney's cat because he was on tour, and then I think he told me then about you, and because you were then in New York already for a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, and that's the first time I heard your name. But I wanted to ask you, like, how did the connection with Binney happen? I know you did that album Out of Airplanes. That was like 2005 or 6. Like, but how did you guys hook up? Because you have like quite a long story with David. You did like, I don't know, 10 records together at least.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, been on a lot of records. Trying to remember exactly. I mean, I used to go to 55 Bar a lot to see him play when he had his band with Thomas and Thomas Morgan. I could say the whole names because not everybody knows. Thomas Morgan, Sax, Dan Weiss. They were playing 55 Bar.
Yeah, I remember.
Like 2001. Yeah, for like 10 years or so. So I used to go see that and really dug seeing them play. And I met David like briefly there. And then he had a gig at Sebulon. And he called me. I can't remember I think maybe that was the first time we played. He called me to do the gig, and it was with Craig Taborn and Kenny Wollesen. More than just like improv gig so I played electric, and it was like more electronic stuff. And I guess he dug it because a few months later, I think it's when he asked me to do the Bill Frisell record, Out of Airplanes, with the same band with Kenny
and Craig
Wollesen, Craig Taborn. And so, and then we did that record, and then Thomas Morgan started getting really busy touring. So then I started subbing for him at the 55 Bar a lot with that band. That was like late 2000s. And then eventually, I just became the regular guy for that. And so that was probably almost 10 years of playing 55 Bar.
Yeah.
Every other Tuesday.
How was that experience, like playing with Frisell, like with Binney? I mean, I love that record because, you know, they couldn't be more different in a way, David and Bill, but still it works. It's amazing.
Yeah. I agree. I know that was an amazing experience. I mean, it's always been one of my dreams to play with Bill, and yeah, it was great. We flew out to Seattle where he lived at the time, and we spent like 3 days in the studio. And
there you did. Oh, okay.
yeah, and yeah, a lot of experimentation and just improv sections, and then there was a lot of like post-production work, which I did help Dave out with some of that, doing stuff in Pro Tools and making sense of some of the long stretches. And so yeah, it was really fun to be involved in that project. I think it came out really good. But yeah, we never did gigs after that, or
yeah, sure. It's heavy band to get gigs for. Yeah,
yeah, he was planning to, but then yeah, everybody's busy and stuff. But yeah, that was a fun experience for sure.
Yeah, it's I love that album. I mean, the rest you did also with with Tyshawn and Mark Turner, but that one kind of was because of Bill. I'm such a huge fan of Bill's, man. So
yeah, I think it stands out in Binney's discography.
Yeah,
like it's something a little different. And
yeah, definitely.
I mean, all of his records have their own thing, but that one is kind of
yeah,
it's cool.
Because the other stuff is so, a lot of odd meters and composed stuff, and this is really like also to hear Frizzell like in this setting, it's so different. I love that. It's like wow.
Yeah, he kind of went.
He can do that shit, really well. So
right, yeah, he went back to like the 80s.
Yeah,
his style that he used to play like in the 80s, a little bit like more like.
I love that.
Yeah,
but and at the same time, I listened to the other day to a record you did with Samuel Blaser, the trombone player, and which was live at the Cornelia. I mean, it's an old one, but it was released now. And then you did one also with Jacob, 2 Miles a Day. The reason I'm asking is because on both of these records is, Paul Motian, the other amazing musician. And for you as a bass player, I wanted to ask you, how was your experience playing, even though as a sideman, but still with Paul, like how did you gel with him and hook up with him together? Like,
I mean, he was a musician I had listened to so much that, when you listen to somebody a lot, you kind of almost picture yourself playing with them in a way, or you.
Yes, so many people say that, man. It's like incredible. Yeah. Well,
you kind of know his beat so well that you kind of know, like, okay, it's not like a brand new experience when you hear his sound or his feel or his. So I felt like it. I mean, the first time we played together was in the studio, so with headphones, and he was in the big room, I was in the booth. So it wasn't maybe the most natural situation, but I have to say it felt really, really good from the get-go. And so the first time I played with him was that record with Jacob Sachs. So me and Jacob, we asked each other, like, if you could play with one person still around, who would it be? And then we both said Paul Motian. Okay, let's do it. And then we wanted to bring in one more person, and we didn't want saxophone because that's been done so much. So we got Matt Maneri, which is one of my favorite musicians. So underrated, I think. He's such genius.
Yeah.
So that was really fun, and we both wrote like 5 tunes each that were like with the intention of, this is a song we can play through once before we record it, and it's easy to catch what this is about. It's not like nothing we have to really rehearse. So that's what we did. We played the song the head through, and then we did one maybe 2 takes. So, and I'm happy it came out as good as it did. It was really fun.
Did you guys ever do gigs with that band?
Yeah, we did, but after Paul was really into it, it seemed like. And so I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years later we started doing gigs with. I don't know why we waited so long, but I think it was because Paul Motian realized that it was fun to play at Cornelia Street Cafe. Like, usually he didn't want to play anywhere else but the Vanguard or like maybe some other major clubs where it's really hard to get a gig. But me and Jacob, we could get a gig at Cornelia Street and ask him to play. And we had to pay him a little bit extra, but that's fine.
Sure.
Get the opportunity to play with him. So we did that 2 times, 2 weekends. or 3. I can't remember. But yeah, so we got to do some shows with the band. I should have recorded those.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if you recorded that actually, because
there might be a mini disc recording somewhere, but I don't think I have it. Maybe Jacob has it. But...
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah,
it's
the
like,
Samuel Blazer one.
Yeah, man, that's like
that was
I don't know where he dug it out from. I mean, it's really...
Yeah, that was just a mini disc on the table of somebody in the front or something. But I think the balance came out pretty good. I think it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, Ross on piano, man. It's Ross Wilson. I mean, it's so beautiful. Yeah, like what you guys did. But at the same time, you mentioned Kris Davis, and I have you on one record of Nicolas Masson, the saxophone player.
Mm-hmm.
And you seem to be very busy already in those years, and you also did your own label, right? Or was that later?
That was a little later. I mean, like you said, you were on Fresh Sound too. So I did for 2. Are you still on? No, you're not.
No. Yeah, clean feeding now around a little.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, nice. So I did the 2 first overseas records on Fresh Sound, and I'm very grateful for Jordi for giving me the opportunity to do that. Great label. Then I just, like a lot of musicians, just realized to just release this music myself, because it's kind of nice just to be in control of your own release schedule. And so I started my own label, called it Loyal Label, and I started it maybe 2007, something like that. And the intent, the first release was the record with Paul Motian, actually. So it was kind of started just to get that record out, and then after that I just released all my releases have been on my own label since then.
How do you see it nowadays? I mean, nowadays, okay, we have kind of Bandcamp, let's say, which is quite pro artists, like opposite to the streaming platforms, which are really terrible for artists. But like, how do you see putting out an album nowadays if you compare it to the old days? Like, of course, financially it's bad, but still, like, what's your view?
Not even the old days. I mean, I guess if you consider 10 years ago the old days, then
I'll put it like that.
I mean, if you say 20, 30 years ago, then it's even bigger difference. But just even 10 years ago, when you could make money selling your record on iTunes, downloads. That thing is totally gone. Like, I never get any money from any digital. You have to have so many streams. I have like a threshold on my thing. Like, I get paid out every time it goes above $150 or something.
I know. I'm kind of the same.
I never. I mean, it's been a while since I got any money. But back then, when it was iTunes and downloads, like I can't remember, but every month or so, or 2 months. Or especially when the record was brand new, you could pay back the costs, and So, but so my label is kind of. I was more active with it maybe, around 5-10 years ago. I released a lot of other people's music, but I'm kind of a little bit taking a break. But I'm still releasing my own music. I'm coming out with a new record now.
Oh, really?
In October, November. So it's like a solo project I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years.
Like solo bass?
No, just more like all kind of studio. I sing a little bit, and it's kind of like a mix of everything. More like it's not pop, but it's beautiful. It's been fun. So that's coming out in November on my label, and I'm gonna do some CDs and downloads, streaming. So, but hopefully Bandcamp can come through, and you can make some money still on Bandcamp. Yeah,
it's something. And gigs, at least you can sell CDs and gigs. I mean, that's the only.
Yeah, CDs and gigs. Yeah. So it's, I don't know what to say. It's just.
Bizarre, right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Bizarre, and I can't imagine like people who experienced making records in the 90s or 80s,
or even earlier.
Yeah, and even earlier, how it's changed since then. Like that might have been like half your income for that year, maybe. If you were successful musician, jazz musician or something, then
yeah,
it was money that was made a dent in your budget, you know, in the good way.
No, it's bizarre. Like I made this talk with Steve Swallow, you know, and with Hal Galper, and all these guys are like, you know, they made records when I wasn't even an idea yet, like, you know, in early 60s. So, you know, it's like, Jesus, people, you know, you experienced everything basically from vinyl to cassettes to, I don't know, what was it? CD?
Right.
Whatever.
Real
you
to
know,
real. Yeah, everything.
yeah. And then MySpace, and then, you know, iTunes or whatever. Now this, whatever this is. So
yeah.
Bizarre times.
I know, it's very strange. But hopefully, I mean, I think the Spotify is too big to really. We as small independent musicians, we don't have any power.
No,
like
sure.
I think if like the big artists pulled out, and then they might be forced to change their payment policy. But
yeah, definitely. But you mentioned the solo record. I just wanted to also ask you this. I listened to a solo gig you did, solo double bass, in some Pete's Candy's shop or something like that. It was called. It's on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you approach a solo bass gig, or even your approach to improv? You know, you play with Tony, and he's one of the best free improvisers there is around. But how do you usually approach a free situation or a solo bass gig? Like when you have to, how do you base your decisions on? Tough question, but
yeah. I mean, in terms of the solo gigs, I've done both ways. Like a few times I've just gone in and haven't had any plan. Like decided that, oh, now I'm just gonna improvise for. If I can get to half an hour, I'm happy. I feel like after half an hour, like I'm starting to bore people with bass. But that's just me. I don't know. But
sorry to interrupt you. Like, you know, John Irabagon, right?
Yeah.
He said, like, the first time he played a solo sax gig, like after 5 minutes, he was like, "Okay, I played everything." What now?
yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, sorry.
So the first time I did a solo gig, I wasn't brave enough to do that because, like you said, you look at the clock or whatever you can only look at the clock, but you feel like you've played for 20 minutes and you played for 5 minutes and like, oh, what do I do for the rest of the time? So the first time I played solo bass, I had a set list almost, like I had some ideas and some structure, and some little tunes, you know, so that helped a lot. So I've done both that, having like more like a structured thing, and also free improvisation. So they're both fun. I don't know from an audience perspective what they prefer, but I think I'm maybe more in the. I like to orchestrate things a little bit, or not orchestrate, but shape things a little bit ahead. But that can also be kind of like restricting. So it's a hard decision. It depends on what kind of gig it is too.
Yeah, sure.
For the solo stuff, I did a record. I did a box set with my wife. She's a photographer, so she did 10 photos, and I did 10 songs that went with the photos. So that came out in 2014, and when we did gigs with that, we had projections of like
that's cool
video kind of / photo thing we put together. So that was kind of interesting. So then I kind of shaped the performance around the flow of the images. So I had more like strict ideas. So that was also cool to combine it with visuals.
Yeah.
But in terms of improvising in general, I think what's my approach? I remember. Yeah. Go ahead.
How do you know? I don't know if you experience that, like, but you know, not many times, but sometimes, okay, you know, you play and you're not in the zone sometimes, or you start repeating to yourself, and or you know, sometimes it's as if I stand there and I'm looking at myself, saying like, man, you're again in the same, you know, in this same whatever licks or whatever you want to call that. But How do you do that? You know, I played with Mark Elias and Tom Rainey and Tony and all these guys who are incredible improvisers. And every gig, it sounds like this incredible freshness of ideas. And also when I listen to you, like at least on records, it seems so fresh. I mean, okay, it's maybe pre-composed a little, but what's your approach usually in this area? I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned from playing with Tony and Tom Rainey. Tom Rainey is an amazing improviser. Like you never know what to expect, which is in the best possible way. It's amazing. And also playing with a lot of great improvisers in Norway growing up, like Paul Nielsen-Love, and so I learned from my peers and my mentors and or whatever, my elders. But my approach is. I like this quote by Paul Bley, like, if you don't hear anything, just lay out. And when you feel like the other musicians around you are running out of ideas or they need an input, then you come in and provide. I think that's a good starting point, or that's a good thing to have in mind sometimes. Like a lot of people, all of us, we all overplay. I think it's a common thing. Other things, if you feel like you're struggling, you can kind of push yourself. Like, don't play the first thing you think about, or the second. Like, go deeper. Like if you're in the flow, you don't even have to think about it. It just comes out. But if you're like struggling and like, I'm just gonna go and do this, don't do that. Just keep like going deeper and like thinking, what can I do now to contrast what's going on, or complement what's going on, or do I maybe want to come in and break off what's going on with something that's kind of abrupt? There are all kinds of possibilities. Like so when free music is working, it's very inspiring.
No, that's why I hear with Paloma Recio, you guys, when you do it, like you know, Tony plays something and Monder comes in with some completely opposite stuff, and it's like, man. It's
all about being in the moment and making decisions. And even if it doesn't work, what you do, if you come in with something abrupt and it doesn't work right away, then take charge and shape it into something that works and work with the other people. And
I mean, it makes sense. No, it makes sense.
But I mean, solo improv is obviously very different. You don't have anybody to play off of, so then it's just your own mind. So that's more dangerous maybe, because
especially solo bass, you know, like you listen to Mike Formanek or Elias, and it's just like they play 1 hour solo bass, and it's like, man, you know, it's and it's hard to practice that too. Like, it's so different just standing at home than being in front of an audience or at the gig, like doing solo, you know. Definitely.
You can't really practice playing for, you can, but it doesn't feel the same, you know. To improvise for half an hour at home is very different than in front of an audience where it's supposed to be a musical statement that people can get something from, you know. So,
what do you practice nowadays? What's your practice routine like when you have time?
I mean, I've been actually practicing a lot of electric bass lately.
Really? Oh man!
And then just because, I mean, I have 2 kids and homeschooling, so there hasn't been that much time to really go deep. But I have a bass electric, so I just, whenever I have time, I do. So that's been fun. To get back into the electric bass a little bit, but upright, it's kind of like always upright. It's just to keep things going a lot. Just triads, arpeggios, scales, left hand strength exercises. I've been into like playing like bebop heads and bass and stuff. Just for fun, you know, like getting the fingers moving and But I'm looking forward to getting a little more focused on the practicing.
But with the electric, were you ever in the phase like of, you know, did you like check out Jocko and all these guys, or like on electric bass, or like what did you dig on electric, like jazz bass?
Yeah, I mean, when I started out like as a teenager, it was Jocko and Marcus Miller and all the usual suspects, you know.
Cool. Man.
But as far as like, I don't know, yeah, the electric bass in improvised music.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
I mean, yeah. It's such an like on-off instrument. There's this small dynamic range, and the sound itself is maybe not that interesting in a way. It's kind of just like you know, it doesn't have a lot of variety or nuance to it. Like an upright bass, you can get so much nuances with the bow or So and then you can start with pedals and stuff, but that can be cool for some things. But yeah, so it's electric bass in the more improvised settings or jazz or whatever can be a challenge. So yeah, I don't know. I think I like the electric bass players everybody like.
Sure.
Like Anthony Jackson, Pino Palladino, like more the pop guys. Like it's fun for me to listen to that stuff.
Oh, sure, me too. Yeah, I love those guys.
I admire like just people who can play so well in that style, and just the sound is great, the feel is amazing.
Yeah,
play for the music, you know, like
that's definitely
more than the pyrotechnics, which is can be fun too, but you know.
once you get older, you're over that. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I noticed that. But yeah, cool, man. Thanks so much, Eivind, for sharing some of these thoughts. So
it's very nice talking to you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.